Candidates Forum. This forum is presented by the Sea Ranch Forum Committee, which presents topics of interest to the Sea Ranch community. The Sea Ranch Forum Committee is separate and is not affiliated with the Sea Ranch Association. Directly following this forum, there will be a potluck reception at the Del Mar House. If you have brought something to share, you can drop it over in the kitchen, either before, so you won't be having it sit on your lap while you're listening to the candidates. At this point, I'm going to be handing the mic over to our moderator for today, Jim Platt. But before that, we don't have name tags out, and somehow they've gone missing. So at some point, you may see name plates in front of the candidates magically appear. At any rate, there's always one little glitch. And I want to thank Jim for organizing this forum. And at this point, I would like to turn it over to him.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the forum. I'd like to tell you what our agenda is and how we're going to proceed here. I met with the candidates before the meeting, and by random drawing, we determined the seating area, the order for opening statements, and the order for closing statements. So that's how that was determined. And we're going to start. The sequence is going to be, they will come to the podium, introduce themselves, and have a 10-minute max opening statement. And then we will take a short break, and while we set up for the Q&A, during the Q&A, we're going to project on the wall a 2-minute timer. So a question is limited to 2 minutes, and a response from our candidates is limited to 2 minutes. And then there will be closing statements of 5 minutes maximum, and then the candidates will be around for the reception, so any discussions that we start can continue there. So I will remind you when we start the Q&A of what the format is for questions, but let me just have you fix it in your mind right now that when you start a question, we'll do it from the floor mic. People will queue up, and if you don't finish in 2 minutes what you want to cover, just go to the end of the line, and when everybody else has had a turn, you can come up again. Okay, and you should start out by saying, my question for candidate X is. This is not your opportunity to scold or lecture the candidates. It's not your opportunity to present a historical review of your view on an issue, or to tell us how you did it when you were on the planning committee or on the board. So it's a question and answer period, this is what it is. And so I'm very pleased to be here this afternoon. I think we've got a terrific group of candidates. And so I would like to get started. And our first speaker is then going to be Scott Nevin. And then they will introduce themselves. Me. Oh, I'm sorry. That's the seating order. Okay. I apologize. The opening statements, the leadoff person is Roy Austin, and then they know the order that they're going to be after that, and I will be reminding them of it. Okay, and so Roy, welcome.
Here I am again. Close to the mic, yeah. It's really going to be a pleasure to be here today. I've been here since about 1989 rather, and I've seen a lot of people come and a lot of people go. And when I look out in the audience, I see a lot of familiar faces, and I also see many that I have not seen before, and I sure would like to meet you all. Has everybody read my first candidate statement? If so, raise your hand. I just want to get an idea. Oh, okay, good, great. That's what I wanted to see. I'd rather not repeat it then in that case. Instead, I'd like to talk about why I am running again. Both Scott and I are second timers at this, and I'd like you to know why I chose to do this for the second time if I'm elected. The reason is that I've got quite a bit of history. Now, I remember when I first moved here in 1989, 1990, there would always be somebody in the audience that would say, well, I remember back in 1970 when. Well, that used to annoy me. And here I find I'm about to do the same thing. So please forgive me for being an old timer, if you will. But now that I've got some history, I really think history is very important. If we choose to ignore it, we could likely relive it. And so in that case, since this is a sort of a get-to-know-you process, I would like to take us back a little bit. When I first got on the board in 1999, there were some major issues. We had just bought the water company. We were winding up, finishing the DMC complex and the pool. A lot of big expenses. And at that time, I was concerned because I'd kept a running plot of your dues, and I was foreseeing the possibility of growth and continued growth. And so what I really want to do right at the moment is to tell you where I stood on some of those issues and why. And then I think that will be pretty clear how that will affect my voting performance if elected for the next 3 years. We had a major decision to make in buying our own water company. The basic issue was also political, sociological, as well as technical. Namely, do we want to be a utility? That was a very major decision, major discussion. Later, I was involved in that process of deciding, now we've got it, who's going to run it? Should it be a separate board, same board, under PUC, not under PUC? There were some very complicated issues, and I was very pleased to have been part of that. The other thing that we had when we bought the water company, we also, because of the state mandate of Term 14, had to build a reservoir to provide an alternate source of water when the surface river flow dropped below 5 cubic feet per second. That was a biggie. It turned out we ended up in litigation, or potential litigation, with Oceanic and Relgi and Race on the reservoir construction. It wasn't correct, it was leaking. And so I was also involved in the executive sessions involving what kind of strategy we would use. In addition to that, there was $700,000 allocated to reline the reservoir after it was repaired. That was another major decision. What bothered me, and I think it still does, and it's not nearly as prevalent today, what bothered me about the past was that we would use dues to levy special assessments. For example, on the DMC pool, you were assessed $8 a month for 4 years to accrue the $1.3 million to install the pool complex. The $700,000 for the reservoir relining, you were assessed $25.88 a month for 1 year to accrue that kind of money. And I began to notice there were other projects also that were similarly funded through the dues. My problem with that was, and now it still is, that's what I call ratcheting. That is, namely, once those one-time projects were completed, your dues for the subsequent year and following years were not adjusted accordingly. And so it kept ratcheting up and up and up. And I think that that's what made me, at that time, as a young Turk, if you will, I considered myself sort of as a needed break on that process. And I would belabor oftentimes to the point of being tiresome and repetitive on spending. But you know, back then, times were pretty plush. The dot-com bubble hadn't burst. And my message was the right one, but I think it was at the wrong time. And I think now that message is still valid, but I think now, for a variety of reasons, it's at the right time. After my 3 years on the board, I then did 6 years on your utilities committee. And the reason for that was because our water company had some pre-existing conditions, and we had put together, along with staff, a 25-year plan for capital improvements. That will amount to about $12 million if we do all projects over about a decade or so. That's going to be some major decision processes for this coming board and future boards to make. So that's another reason that I want to be involved. I want to make sure the ratcheting process does not happen again. I think we essentially at Sea Ranch are now approaching build-out. I think the last number I got was about 1,776 homes are now built out of 2290 lots. And so we are approaching a sort of an equilibrium, a sort of a stable, mature state. I think that we've, over the years, built pretty much all of the amenities that we ever wanted. DMC complex, pool, and upgrading of facilities, one-eyed jacks, and so forth. And I think now that I see no compelling reason to continue that sort of growth. Now, that may be that there will be some projects and amenities that will be needed, but they will be debated. But I think the dues accordingly should start the process of leveling up. My running plot has shown that over the last 10 years or so, your dues have been increasing at a rate of about 6.5% per year. That's an exponential growth in the strictest of sense, and it means that your dues would double every 12 years. Last year, I was really pleased that our board acknowledged the fact that, hey, what's going on here? We really need to see if we can start mitigating that. This last year, I was really pleased when the board voted, after much discussion, as you recall, to hold your dues constant for this next year at $180 a month. I am really pleased after all of my years of worrying and fussing about this.
1 minute, right?
I am really, pardon?
1 minute.
Okay, I'm about to quit. I have to quit. I'm really pleased with that. And I think it's a basic change in mentality. And so the last reason that I decided to run again was I want to be part of that and make sure that that impetus, that mentality stays. Ratcheting is an easy trap to fall into, and I would like to see that we are constantly aware of that. The Finance Committee will be holding workshops to look at the various options in the near future, and I intend to be at all of those, whether I'm elected or not. And so with that, I think I'll just close it off, and thank you for coming by. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you, Roy. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank the Forum Committee for putting this together for us, and especially for you for taking time out of your sunny day to come here for your future directors. I'm going to short-circuit the normal introduction to the candidate speech. I'm not going to take up our time regaling my love for the Sea Ranch or how I drove up the coast with my sweetie and fell in love with the area. Let's just say I care deeply for the Sea Ranch, and that's why I'm up here. I want to talk to you for the next 10 minutes about where we're headed as an association, especially as it relates to our water company, because I think it's really important and it's going to be an expensive thing that the next board has to deal with. And something that all of us have a lot less of these days, and that seems to be money. I ran for the board 7 years ago because I saw nearly what everyone else did at the time, and that was dues appeared to be growing faster than anything else that I spent my money on. Turns out it wasn't a momentary blip, and on the contrary, it turned out, as Roy said, a well-established pattern over time. We've been plodding along, increasing dues on average about 6.5% every single year, and finally, I think we've come to the conclusion that we can't continue that kind of growth. Now, our association is well established. We've created a community that garners recognition and excellence for everything that we seem to do around here. We've hit our 40s, we're kind of moving into middle age now, and we've created some of the best amenities and some of the best associations. So I think now it's time to enjoy, maintain, and protect what we've created, and now is not time for a midlife crisis. It's critical that we break this cycle of 6.5% dues increases, because if we don't, in another decade, we're going to be looking at $350 a month for dues. And I'll use my experience. We bought our property here in 1999, and that was 10 years ago, and dues at that time were $95 a month. In 9 years, we just about doubled that to $180 a month. But managing our growth to a lower growth target, let's say if we pick the Bay Area's inflation rate, is not going to be easy. The problem is our expenses mainly cover staff and services. We don't have the luxury of getting our services from overseas or outsourcing our workforce to where labor's cheap. We've got insurance and energy that seem to pop up out of nowhere and surge in cost on us. And if any candidate gets up here and tells you that they're going to be the ones that's going to reverse spending, I hope you view that with an eye of skepticism. One person, one director is not going to make that happen. Putting the brakes on spending is going to happen when we collectively, as a community, agree that it's the right thing to do. And I have to believe with this current economic climate, we're coming to that conclusion. Now, one of the steps that we can take as a community is to start re-examining our priorities and programs. And who here in this room hasn't had to rethink their retirement or what they spend money on in the last year? Kind of my running joke right now is my 401k is now a 201k. And my compensation got a 15% clip by my employer in response to the current economic crisis. And that got my attention. That forced Linda and I to look at everything that we spend money on. Now, we as a community have the perfect opportunity to do the same thing. Over the next several months, our finance committee is holding a series of workshops. I sincerely hope that everyone participates in that one way or another. This is our chance to review our programs and brainstorm where we think we can achieve cost savings. We can certainly talk about ways to raise revenue, and I know this has been kind of a topic ongoing for several years now, but let's not kid ourselves. Our primary source of income for this association is derived from dues. So, right now I think we need to be encouraging members to become engaged in the community. Volunteers are really the backbone of this association. This community excels because we've got so many people that care so deeply about this place that they give of themselves, their time, and their expertise. Volunteering is not just good for the Sea Ranch, it's good for your soul. To quote Eleanor Roosevelt, when you cease to make a contribution, you begin to die. Right now, we need to be looking for ways to make our staff as productive as possible. We can help keep our salary expenses under control by creating an environment for our staff where they're motivated and as productive as possible. One thing we can do is we can abandon being a paper-based organization and work to modernize our information technology infrastructure. It's going to take a small investment on our part, but will yield dividends in the long run through greater staff productivity. Think of all the things in your life that have been made easier by information technology. For me, pretty easy. I love online banking. I used to write a stack of checks every month, and then I'd have to go beg my wife for some stamps, and then I'd have to take them to the post office and mail them off. But now with the services offered through my credit union, I get to do that for free. I can do it online. I can do it in a fraction of the time. No checks, no stamps, no post office, just me, my laptop, and a cup of coffee. So I've been a huge fan for many years now of online banking because it makes me more productive and it gives me time to spend on other endeavors. Now, our association and water company offices should realize that kind of same productivity and time savings. It would be great to have our databases work together. Members should be able to file applications online. Water meters should be read electronically. We should have a geographic information database at our disposal for doing land studies or tracking association assets. Every piece of paper that our staff has to touch costs us money, and having easy and ready access to information allows us to solve some of our big problems very easily. So this brings us to one of the current topics of interest now, and that's our water company. One of my favorite tasks as a past director was giving the annual report to the membership on where our water company was going and what happened over the previous year. A safe, reliable, and affordable source of water for us is not a want. Think about it. Without it, there would be no Sea Ranch. We need it to live, and we need it for our safety. And you don't have to look deep into the tea leaves to realize that water is becoming more divisive and more scarce in California. So the problem we have right now is the Department of Health Services has told us that we don't have an adequate delivery capability of water in certain sections of the Sea Ranch. We have a water company with design problems and aging equipment that wasn't maintained before we bought it. If you think about it, we bought the car that the previous owner didn't change the oil on. After years of kicking this can down the road, thankfully we finally have a plan in hand to fix it. But there's a problem though. It's a rather big problem. We've got to figure out how to fund this plan to the tune of about $11.5 million. And it's not a nice thing to do, and it's not gold plating on our water system. It has to be done. But the silver lining in this investment in our water company is that when we get done, we're going to have a water plant that's easier to operate, it's more reliable, and it's going to meet the mandates of the Department of Health Services. So this gets me back to my earlier arguments for modernizing our infrastructure and investing in those things that make our staff more productive. The plan's going to eliminate redundant assets like water tanks. It's going to lower our costs going into the future for maintenance and operation. The plan's going to bring productivity savings by us remotely monitoring our facilities. However, there's always a however, right? The however is we need to have a good information technology infrastructure to make that monitoring happen. Analysis is showing us right now that when the plan's complete, our water company should be able to operate with one less employee than other water companies of the same size. A more efficient water company means you and I get to hang on to more of our money. The board's going to need to grapple with how to pay for this and how to structure our water company into the future. It's a large investment and a huge project, probably the biggest thing that this association's ever done. I have a deep understanding of our water company as a director, as a member of the Utilities Committee, and as doing pro bono volunteering for the water company. I know I'd be an effective and knowledgeable director as the board works through this plan.
2 minutes.
Think of 2 words that can stir up the listserv or a dinner party at the Sea Ranch. Anybody think of blue tarps? No? How about the design committee? I believe our design committee is there to protect our interests through quality design and building. Home design now is getting much more difficult on the Sea Ranch as we approach build-out. The design committee is there and it exists to hear your concerns and to protect your privacy as that house gets built next to you. As a board member, I will not meddle in the operation of the design committee. The board's role is pretty clear in relation to the design committee. It's to appoint members and hear appeals. The design committee needs to operate clear political interference by the board. In conclusion, I want to assure you as a director, I will uphold and enforce the CC&Rs of our association. Some of the most difficult and gut-wrenching decisions that I had to make as a director was how to deal with CC&R violations. Thankfully, our staff does a great job at making sure that most of these get resolved before the board ever has to see them. But the Sea Ranch has been really successful because we have a solid set of covenants and restrictions, we have the resources to enforce it, and we've had boards that have had the wherewithal to uphold it. Our CC&Rs are the legal and social contract which bind us together in this great experiment called the Sea Ranch.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dave Ball. Is there anyone out in the crowd who is a Michigan State Spartan fan? Well, there are 2 of us that are. Scott, Nevin, I found out before the meeting, and I are both from Michigan State. And so we are giving up big time being here this afternoon. I want to thank Jim, the moderator, and the forum committee, the other candidates, and all of you that are here today. I'd like to introduce myself. As I said, I'm Dave Ball. My wife Kathleen is out there somewhere. We bought our lot here in 1997 on Deerfield Road, designed a home and moved into it part-time in 2000, full-time in 2002. We have 3 children. Sometimes it seems like 8. And 8 grandchildren. And we just adopted 2 new children. We have 2 one-year-old golden retriever puppies who are out in the parking lot right now, wishing they were in here. They love the place. They've been here for 7 weeks. They love the Bluff Trail and they love the dog park. I spent 35 years in management, mostly in the computer industry, and then since I've been up here, I've been a real estate agent and broker for the last 6 years. I'm now semi-retired. I pound real estate signs in the ground for my wife, Kathleen. There are 3 things that I would like to talk about today. It's hard to watch TV or pick up a paper and not see a lot of bad news. I think there's a lot of good news at the Sea Range, and I want to talk a little bit about that. That doesn't mean that there are not a lot of challenges and that there are things that the board is going to have to step up to, and so I want to talk about issues and suggestions, and then I want to respond mostly to your questions. Someone said that his 401k has gone to a 201k. I've heard other people say it's gone to a 101k. But having said that, our dues are flat. We've heard that already. The water company has a plan to secure its future, which I think is great. I hear a lot of things from people that I talk to outside of the community who do not live here about how good the communications are between the homeowners association and themselves, and they really appreciate that. I think finally we have an understandable budget process. That's what people tell me who have come to the budget meetings this year, and I'm glad to see that because the Finance Committee has worked hard on that. One of the things I value the most about living here is that I can walk out of my home and not worry about being robbed. Our security here is excellent. I think there was 1 theft or 1 robbery in 2008. I think that's really great. I believe our association is very well managed, and I think our staff does an excellent job. The bottom line to all of this, from my perspective, is that our home values are holding much better here than Sonoma County or anywhere else pretty much in the country. And I think that's because we have very good amenities and we have an excellent infrastructure. Now let's talk about the bad news. Everyone's concerned about the budget. I'm glad it's flat next year. The Finance Committee supported that, and so did I. But something that people don't talk about very much is in order to do that, the association had to cut its expenses by $450,000. Okay? Now we can't do that on an ongoing basis without starting to put some holes in what's going on around here. And so I believe that we have to find ways to raise revenue other than just dues. And one of the things that I support is the lodge expansion. Now I know that's not popular with everyone, and I like that view as much as you do. But if the lodge would pay the homeowners association the same 3.5% that the rental companies pay on behalf of their owners, that would generate about $18 a month in dues reduction. It's a big, big number. Along those same lines, there are a lot of people here who rent their homes but don't do it through an agency. It's a rental by owner. They do not pay the 3.5% that the people who do through the rental companies. I estimate that that could generate another couple of dollars of dues reduction. But there are some other things out there that are potentially really huge. And these are not my ideas, but I support them. One of them is what is called an association cooperative. It's essentially a way to join you, the members, and the association and create buying power together so that we can buy things like propane, gasoline, food, all those things together. And because of our ability to do that, we can get lower prices. That's also a potential revenue opportunity to the association we're taking a little bit back on what the savings is. The other idea that is kind of along that same lines, which is again not my idea, but it's coming out of the Solar Task Force, is to create a solar farm here. We've got a great opportunity, a great place to do it, folks. It's right up here against the reservoir. You'll never see it, okay? But that could provide electricity to the association, and it also could provide electricity to the homeowners at a reduced cost. So, bottom line is, we've got to find creative ways to increase revenue, not just cut expenses. And I really challenge all of you to think about things like that as we go forward. The other side of it, obviously, is budget control, and you've heard from the candidates already that the Finance Committee is holding a series of budget workshops. The first one is on May 2nd, and it's an opportunity for all of us to participate and be part of the solution. And so I would urge that you go to that. But I think more fundamentally, the board, the association, and the Finance Committee need to work together to develop a long-range strategy for this thing. I like a 10-year strategy. What are we going to try to do over the next 10 years to keep our dues down and our expenses down? I personally support the idea of holding our operating expenses to the local cost of living increases. And that's one of the reasons why we're flat on our dues this next year. Someone also talked about technology, which I also support. We now have an information systems person on our staff. Better lucky than good, very honestly. That was somebody who got hired for something else and had the skill set. But I think there's a lot of things that could be done. The bill pay that Scott talked about, that cuts our time paying bills 90%. I think that's a great thing to do. The same thing with the dues and the water company payments. We can do all those things. The chipper that was bought last year for $50,000 resulted in reducing 2 headcount reduction this year. There's a great example of using technology to cut expenses. On the other hand, I am not in favor of cutting infrastructure or amenities for short-term dues reduction. Water company. I've been told the water company is probably a $50 million asset. It's our biggest single asset, and we can't do without water. As Scott said, you can't be here without water. The plan is good. The issue is financing it. We had a PUC, we had a hearing recently on the water company, and a PUC expert came. And here's the problem. It's a private company, we own it now. If we finance it, if we go out to the bond market, the long-term bond market, the estimate that Tim Gallagher, who's our treasurer, has come up with is our water bills will go from $60 now to $160 in 2016. Okay? So what's the alternative? Well, the alternative is kind of scary too. We can go to a community services district, but the problem there is that the only people who can vote for that are probably the people who are in this room, which represents about 40% of the total voters. And so we disenfranchise 60% of our voters. Everyone likes to yell about the design process. It's worked for a lot of us. It needs to work for all of us. I think we need more consistency. We can do that by having one design team assigned throughout a process. We need better communication between the design committee and the architects and the owners. More frequent meetings can do that. There are other things I'm concerned about. Bluff top erosion, which is happening at 3 or 4 inches per year. And this is an ocean-side community. Everybody who wants an ocean view here ought to be able to have one. And so I think we need to work on those things too. Thanks very much. I look forward to your questions.
Just push up. Can you hear me?
Pretend it's an ice cream truck.
Thank you, Jim, for making all these arrangements. I appreciate it. And I would like like to tell you that it would almost be easier for me to go over there and play the piano than it is for me to make this presentation. But I would ask, if you read my first statement, you know that I love Sea Ranch. And when you love something, it demands care and attention and not necessarily currency. Thus, my platform should be considered one of awareness of increasing costs and for all the owners. Actually, running for the board is like taking...
Yes, she does.
It's closer.
Yes,
This way, okay, I'm sorry. Running for the board is like enrolling in a college program. I have been reading many association documents and will continue to do that. There are new plans and issues, especially the water company. And the best way to decide on these will be with research, conversation, and compromise. When members first heard that I was running for the board, I hoped for help with campaigning, you know, maybe a mailing party or a social to meet new people. And fortunately, that did happen. I also listened to detailed stories of owners' difficulties with the design approval. And these incidents seem to be seared in the teller's memory. If it were a few people, I might assign them to the crank column, but it happened many, many times. And I think that the design committee does a wonderful job of keeping the mission in place, and these might just be technicalities. From June 2006 until this last March, the number of homes under construction dropped from 41 to 18, which is an over 50% decrease. And this is a significant loss in revenue to the association. The other obvious topic that members mentioned was increasing dues. I'm faithful in reading the bulletin and also keep up with messages sent from the TSRA info alerts. And I have not, like the other speakers, noticed that it was 6.5%. But I believe this percentage particularly impacts what I have named the FIs. These are the fixed incomers, whose cost of living increases probably will be about 2 or 3%, or in that range. After researching voting patterns for the last few years, we come very close to having the required number of voters. But last year, instead of having a change between number 1 and number 2 in the candidates of maybe 80 or 100 votes, it was 252 votes between number 1 and number 2. And that person's position was definitely in the cost-cutting category. And this suggests to me that the ugly word, money, may well be the voters' number 1 concern. What would I do to maintain or reduce dues assessment? Today it would be impossible for me to list all the specific items, but I do have some ideas, like looking at more volunteer efforts. I will work to cut costs and not to cut corners. The Facilities and Maintenance Department adheres to its budget and gives outstanding service. I have spoken with the Director of Security and was invited to take a Saturday drive-around field trip, which I will definitely schedule. One issue, and please note the allusion, is the bulletin. Its size and timeliness sometimes seem inappropriate. It might be that the things that we could address with the bulletin would be moving the interviews and the garden information to the soundings. The authors of those interesting and informative columns would be enjoyed equally in the other publication. Heavy paper for an expendable newsletter, which might likely be recycled, seems not ecological. And the bulletin has increased in size in the last 4 years by a large percentage, from 20 to 36 pages. I think that my technical writing experience propels me into something called brief and clear. The cost per year for the soundings is 1/6 that for the bulletin, and these might be rearranged to be effective on an editorial and financial manner. My other suggestion to help with the economy would be to make committees self-supporting. If they were, I personally would gladly contribute to the costs of the demonstration garden, the archives, the VIP committee, the award-winning Coastal National Monument Task Force, and by introducing new committees, we merely add to our obligations. I think the word passion best describes my attitude about living lightly on the land. Maybe my campaign motto should be, "Lively lady lives lightly on the land." I've been on the board of the California Native Plant Society and the Redwood Coast Land Conservancy. The missions of these organizations, like Sea Ranch, is to maintain a natural and native environment. And that is monitored with the need for fire safety and view enhancement. I believe the 101% trees that have grown since the 1960s can be managed with care and teamwork. In 2003, I attended an all-day workshop led by Lawrence Halprin, an impressive 9 hours, and no one left. One new owner asked if there could be a more uniform regulation for consistent mowing of the meadow and placement of plants around houses. Mr. Halprin jumped up and said, "Nature is not neat." And I recall his response when I hike on the trails and enjoy the landscaping and the mindful placement of homes at Sea Ranch and think we've done well. No, it's not neat. It's magnificent. In the 10 years I worked at the Sea Ranch Lodge store, I greeted architects from all over the world, and their most common question was, "Where is condominium 1? Well, because they can't go in there, I had to point them out to Bealer's Point and they could look from that view. And then they would come back in and thank me and buy a postcard. But they predictably also purchased the Allender Halprin, Canty and Linden book for the 40th anniversary called The Sea Ranch. I am looking forward to the lodge expansion and the benefits it will bring the residents and guests to enjoy the beauty of this place. I have a campaign committee whose advice I value. My husband John shares my love and allegiance to Sea Ranch and supports this endeavor. I wish to meet Sea Ranch members who agree or who disagree with my platform. The challenges for board members are never ending. The future will require decisions about the possibility of a community services district, acknowledging the decline in building applications, evaluating operations costs, and promoting committee support. I will study all documents and I will attend the meetings faithfully. If elected, I will support you, our members, the administration, and the staff, and you will receive my attention, whatever your views. Thank you very much.
First, I would like to thank Laurie Mueller, Rosemary Hawker, and Sandy Bush for their contributions that they have made during their terms on the board. You've made a difference. It will be remembered, and it is appreciated. I would also thank the other candidates. This is a sacrifice. You're being here, both you and your family, and I appreciate that this isn't about one of you, it's about service to our community. I'm Bill Retzer. Mary and I have lived here full-time since 2003. Sea Ranch is our life. It's where we want to be, and we feel blessed to be here. I view serving on this board as a very special opportunity to be of service in our community. Over the course of my working career, I've served on boards of many companies, both public, private, as well as not-for-profit. When you do this a lot, as I have, you get to understand what it takes to be a good board member. Listening skills, an ability to work with the people, to respect other points of views, and the ability to develop a consensus. A good board member should be a doer and be willing to accept a task when requested and seek a task that others are avoiding. Over the last 40 years, some of the views that I back are, over the last 40 years, our association budget has grown about 6.5%. You've heard that over and over. With the expected doubling of our water company rates in the near future, I personally feel that it's imperative that we should attempt to hold future association budget increases to no more than our area's cost of living. New association programs and services will need to be funded through increased operating efficiency or revenue enhancements. To be more efficient, we need to use information technology as much as possible. The electronic payment of our association's dues and water company bills is probably a good example. We currently run 2 bill payment systems side by side. Roughly half our members pay electronically with no staff impact, while the other half pay manually, requiring staff time to post and manage payments. I've seen studies that have put the cost of hand processing of payments at around $10 per payment. Now, I'm not saying that's what it costs us, but what I am saying is that whatever it costs is an unnecessary expenditure for our association and our water company. The Sea Ranch Bulletin and the Sea Ranch Soundings are already distributed electronically through our website. I originally proposed eliminating the hard copy distribution of our bulletin prior to the start of this year's budget hearings. I continue to support that position. Director Beach has stated that this represents a savings of over $54,000 annually. We could offer an opt-out provision for those members who still require a hard copy, and there are certain legal considerations that need to be met, all of which would reduce that savings. But at the end of the day, it would still be a net savings. Our association programs have been very thoughtfully put together, and changes to the scope or implementation of those programs should receive the same thoughtful analysis. To facilitate that, I proposed, and our board has accepted, that our Finance Committee, upon which I serve as Vice Chair, hold a series of budget workshops starting in May to receive input from members detailing ways to reduce expenses and enhance revenues for our association. This will allow the Finance Committee to make specific recommendations to the board for the next budget cycle, based on well-considered member input. As possible revenue enhancement, I would be interested in forming a group purchasing program. Thank you, Dave. To leverage the collective buying power of our members, our association, and perhaps others willing to do business with selected vendors both inside and outside of our area. I call this program the Sea Ranch Exchange. Members of the exchange, for a small annual fee payable to Sea Ranch, revenue enhancement, would be entitled to preferential pricing negotiated by the exchange. Theoretically, this could include everything from propane to large expenditures such as solar systems. I currently chair the Solar Array Task Force, and we have already determined that significant discounts exist for the types of group buys that I'm proposing. Just so you know, I have personally developed group purchasing programs like this in the past. At this year's first budget hearing, Rich Keene suggested the use of a charitable foundation to replace our association as the source for funding our nationally recognized California Coastal National Monument Stewardship Task Force. That's the kind of innovative thinking and commitment we need from our members to keep our budget under control in the future. If a new foundation is necessary, I will volunteer to help Rich with its formulation. I have personally formed 2 other charitable foundations in the past. I strongly support our design review department, DCEM, and the preservation of our founders' values, which make it possible for us to live lightly on the land. Anyone who has traveled to Bodega Bay, Irish Beach, or up to Shelter Cove on the Lost Coast can attest to the value that design review and DCEM has brought to our community. That said, I would like to find ways to reduce the tensions surrounding the design review process. I feel this would enhance consistent application of design rules for all member applications. As was shown with the lodge mediation, anytime you can get people together to discuss their positions, you have the opportunity to reach mutually acceptable solutions. I will be the first to recognize that what I'm about to recommend will have to come from design review and not from the board. I would like to propose that design review consider the following to enhance their process. 1, the design review should encourage applicants to waive the 45-day processing requirement. If applicants will do that, design review has already agreed that they will assign the same team of architects to manage their project from the beginning through to its completion. 2, design review should commit to a trial that allows owners and their architects to attend all meetings where their applications are discussed. Design review should permit owners and their architects to teleconference into meetings that they are unable to attend in person. And lastly, after talking to a number of area architects, that design review should meet with our area's architects and designers at least twice annually to facilitate an open discussion of problems, concerns, trends, and achievements.
2 minutes.
I would also support a proactive view restoration and bluff-top cypress management program developed cooperatively between DCEM and our neighborhoods. It's my understanding that Joe McBride has submitted an update to his vegetation management report. Hopefully, this will provide for a better choice than cypress for erosion control on our bluff tops, which may also result in the restoration of some lost view corridors. I don't believe the lodge project will be the last commercial project at the Sea Ranch. The potential for an aging in place or other project will occur, and I believe that we should develop a commercial set of design review guidelines to better accommodate those projects. I support continuing the investigation of the Community Services District using a hybrid voting model that provides all Sea Ranch owners with the opportunity to vote on the CSD's board of directors. We can then determine if we want the CSD to take over our sewer and septic services from the county, which may result in a net increase in revenues from Sonoma County. We need to provide for the finance.
1 minute.
Thank you. For finance and essential upgrades to our water company, which is one of the most important parts of our infrastructure. A CSD may be the avenue to provide less expensive government financing to eliminate future dealings with the Public Utilities Commission. I am personally supportive of all of the fire safety efforts that we can take to mitigate our exposure to what I consider to be the biggest threat to our community. We've made great strides in the last few years, and we must continue on our efforts to clean out our hedgerows, eliminate our connected communities, and maintain a fire-safe environment for our residents. In conclusion, I view myself as a consensus builder, and I will listen to both sides of an issue. I value compromise when it is in the best interest of all concerned. I won't ignore problems that need attention, and I would be grateful for your vote, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Very impressive array of topics here. That was a well done. We'll now take a 10-minute break where we will convene sharply at 4:05 and start with the Q&A. Thank you. We have one meeting going here. behind the mic. Again, there will be 2 minutes. Everybody's going to get a chance to talk, but it's going to be in 2-minute increments. So, and as you get to that microphone, I'm told you need to have it very close to your mouth like I'm doing it right now. So, with that, I'd like people to start. Right now, we're ready for our first question. Please step to the mic, form a line there, and we'll start. Thank you very much for coming today. Now, I will ask you to start. We're taping this, so give your name, your unit number, and your lot number, and then my question 4.
All right, Dalton Krieger, Unit 35E83. The question is to all members, this can be a yes or no answer. Do you feel that the Department of Emergency Services and or the Communications Department, we need a full-time manager for both departments? Yes or no, every candidate, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Roy to lead off on our responses for that, and then we'll just go down the table until everybody's had a turn.
No.
Yes.
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 So put that microphone. Good.
Yes.
All right. Next question. Thank you very much.
Debbie Tyler, Unit 24, lot 123. This is for everyone. We've recently seen a design committee decision compromised by intense political pressure. If you are elected, what would you do to try to protect our autonomous design committee from such pressure?
Okay, I'm going to ask Dave to start that, and we'll go down the table. Now, are you clear? Don't run off. Maybe there's some clarification going to be needed. Put your mouth right against that microphone.
Debbie, could you give me
I'm
a little...
already in trouble. Do you want me to get in trouble?
Can you give a little clarification, please?
Sure.
What decision are you talking about?
Oh, the lodge decision.
Oh, the lodge. Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
I didn't know there was any other.
They're going on all the time around us. I'm not sure I agree with your position to begin with. The design committee had responded to the lodge and said, here's some things we would like you to do and change. And there appeared to be, there were loggerheads. In fact, I went to a meeting that the lodge management presided over and invited some people to. And they were kind of trying to get us all to come to a meeting, basically to have the members take a position on this. And the people who were there, because they'd invited them, were in support of the lodge. But one of the members, and I'm specifically talking about Bill Retzer, proposed to the lodge management and the design department, and through them to the design committee, that he mediate a 3-day meeting and try to come to agreement. And both sides agreed to do that, and they did come to an agreement. And so I don't see the problem, I'm sorry.
Okay, moving down the table, Bill would be next, and then we'll come back around to Scott and Roy.
Okay, so I stuck my nose in there, and simply because I didn't like to have the thought of a vacant lodge sitting at the entrance to Sea Ranch. I could picture a Valhalla hotel there, and I didn't like the site that I saw. And it seemed to me like it was a shame to have the two parties who, when I talked to them, said they wanted to meet, not have the opportunity to meet face to face. And so I helped facilitate that. Now, what's a facilitator do? I spent almost a month getting all the background, looking at all the drawings, talking to everybody that was involved, including the finance people for the lodge. And when I determined that everybody wanted to sit down and see if they couldn't make this work, we put the facilitation together. And my job as a facilitator was to keep everybody at the table. And if people got kind of nasty, and I would separate them. And if people got kind of disgusted and wanted to leave, I would job on them in the side room. And my whole job was to keep people there and keep them engaged and to see if they couldn't arrive at a solution, which they did. This was their decision, wasn't my decision, wasn't the board's decision, it wasn't the community's decision. This was the decision between design review and the lodge owner. And I think in that respect, it was successful.
Okay, thank you, Bill.
Well, I spent a lot of time down there, so when that came up and we got the letter saying that possibly they would close the lodge, I was standing there and I turned out to be the runner because I showed it to another friend of mine and he chased down and talked to the manager of the lodge and they eventually got in touch with Bill, who did such a good job in matching them. But I hope that that kind of thing won't continue to be necessary where you have to have hard-nosed, forehead to forehead, 3-day meetings when these kinds of things come up. I'm very delighted that the lodge is going to go forward, and I certainly think that Bill gets a lot of credit for that.
Okay, Scott?
Debbie, I'll try to speak directly to the question and not about the lodge issue. And I think your question was about political influence on the design committee. I hope I made myself clear during my speech. If I didn't, my personal feeling is the design committee needs to be independent from the board, and the board should keep its nose out of the design committee. The role is pretty clear on what the board does with the design committee.
Am I on?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. Debbie, you started out by saying, using the words political pressure. That's asking me a question which is sort of similar to when did you stop beating your wife? And the answer to that, of course, is the day I got married. The difficulty I have with that is I don't know of pressure. I have no evidence. And so I cannot answer your particular question on that. I do applaud the fact that we had a good mediator. I think that was needed. If I had been on the board, you can be very sure that I would have been there as an observer. I think it was a closed meeting, wasn't it, Bill?
Actually, the board has a subcommittee that was appointed for the lodge, and the subcommittee was there the entire time that the meeting was held.
But it was not open to the public.
That's correct, it was not open to the public.
Yeah, and I was a little, I can't call it miffed, but I would like to have known that the meeting was going to take place and been there as an observer, as a member of Sea Ranch. If there was the subcommittee, I would have sure lobbied with my fellow board members to be on that subcommittee. So I'm sorry I can't answer your question directly because I have no evidence of political pressure.
Okay.
Is it a model for the future?
I'm sorry?
What happened to the mediation of a design committee decision?
Is that a quick yes or no, or what, would you like everybody to respond?
Quick yes or no?
Okay, well, let's start with,
Did you say it again? I'm hard to hear. Quiet.
hold it down, quiet now.
Go
Is
ahead.
mediation of a design committee decision a model you want to carry forward for the future?
Oh, you mean if?
Do you want to do it again?
Okay, let's stop for just a second. This is the second question before we get to the next one. And we'll start with Dave on this. This is a yes or no. The question is mediation of design review decisions a model for the future? So, no.
No.
I'm going to say yes.
Bill?
No, I don't believe it is.
Cecilia?
No.
Scott?
I certainly hope not.
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, the 2-minute timer worked well for everybody stayed within the bounds. That was really good. I realize our questioners can't quite see it, but I can, so I can help you with that. They're doing a good job too. So, Rich, would you like to ask your question?
Right now?
Right now.
Rich Shimmer, 35F, number 6. Let's turn back to the water company issue, the major expansion, which a couple of you mentioned in your opening remarks. This is, as I think some of you indicated, an extremely important financial commitment for all of us who live here at CRAN. And I guess also an important one from my standpoint personally, having been involved with the development of the plant. So I'm very concerned that this project, as it moves forward, is managed as best we can manage it, and that the end result achieves the objectives that we all have in mind. Given that, I was dismayed to learn not too long ago that the two elected officers of the Utilities Committee had resigned, and had done so, it was disclosed, because they were failing to receive information which they felt they should be receiving with respect to that project. I would like to know from each of you, prospective board members, what you would intend to do, should you be elected, to try to make sure that this particular project is managed as effectively as it can be, and we get the value for money that each of us expects.
Okay, Rich, Dave, in case we need a clarification. Cecilia, would you like to start us off on that? We'll go to Scott next.
I think I'm going to have to be a little vague here because I don't know that much about it. But if you're talking about information being given to people that need it, I don't think that there's a problem there because there are regulations in place. And so if you're talking that it's opaque now and you want it to be transparent, I think maybe we'll aim for translucent. But anyway, I don't think that the idea of people not knowing exactly what's going on would continue under my watch if I got it.
Okay, Scott.
First off, I think there's definitely a role for the Utilities Committee to play in this going forward. And in talking with some board members about this and reading minutes that were forwarded to me from the Utilities Committee, it wasn't apparent to me that information was withheld. I believe information wasn't ready yet. And I believe that was passed on. But going forward, it's absolutely critical that the Utilities Committee get all of the information that flows out of the water company.
Again, the question is particularly in regard to managing of the project going forward and any oversight that you expect the Utilities Committee to be able to exercise.
Now, can you hear Rich?
Which in turn
Okay.
requires information.
Rich, I guess you're going to have to get really close to that mic.
Is that mic on?
How is that? I don't hear any.
It's not on. It's not on or not plugged in.
How's that? Well, Denny turned it off. I don't know. All right, now I've got the microphone.
Well, you know, Rich.
Let me repeat the question then.
All right.
The question is, with respect to this multi-million-dollar project we have before us, what kind of steps will you personally take to try to ensure that we get oversight and participation in the execution of this project from as many member experts and others upon whom we can draw in the community?
Well, it turns out we really didn't need a microphone because I've read your mind already, just like you've read mine. You and I were both involved in that process for 6 years, and I think you know my answer. there has been a long, tortuous, in some cases painful path in the relationship of the Utilities Committee with past boards and with staff and past CMs. And at one time, there was some changes in the charter which removed the word oversight. At that time, a number of us complained about that, and I really feel, and I still feel very strongly, that oversight of any particular project is an absolute necessity. All we have to do is read the papers today to see what can happen from lack of oversight over the financial people, for example. So I think the Utilities Committee needs to be strengthened. Maybe not the Utilities Committee itself, but there needs to be the process of oversight. As Scott says, it turns out that the Utilities Committee is perhaps the best choice simply because it's made up of some very competent people. All of us have had 30, 40 years of professional engineering technical experience, and I don't think you can find a more competent group. And I don't think you can find actually a more objective group. I do agree that periodically one needs to go outside to seek second opinions, if you will, from consulting organizations. But I think the Utilities Committee on the capital improvement program amounting around $12 million has to be reviewed continually. It will be reviewed continually. And therefore, it needs to have the insight of those people on that committee, such as yourself, when you were there.
Okay, thank you.
Even though I'm on the Finance Committee, I'm also the liaison to the Utilities Committee, and I've attended a number of their meetings, most recently some of the meetings that have been kind of contentious. My understanding about the water company project is part of that project is that there will be a paid project manager. Is that correct as far as you know, Rich?
I have heard that,
Okay.
although I would not support that.
Okay. Well, my understanding is that we're going to be spending a lot of money and we will have a paid professional project manager responsible for the project to the board of directors of the water company. I'm not sure I feel comfortable with oversight. I think that we have a lot of people here with good experience and good insights, and we need to take advantage of all of that we can. But at the end of the day, the committees, particularly the Utilities Committee and two others, are really staff to the board. When the board says we would like you to do something, we do it, or that's what we're supposed to do. That's the way it works in the Finance Committee. We also have the right to suggest things to the board that we think we should do. And so I would hope that the salient information for this project is provided to the Utilities Committee. And if the Utilities Committee feels like something needs to be done, they will then carry that back and report it to the board.
This is the 800-pound gorilla in the room. The water company infrastructure rebuild is terribly important to us. It's a $50 million asset, and it has to be done right. And when I look at the staff of the association, that is the association, not the water company, I don't see anybody in there that really has the expertise to manage this project as I understand it, which means that we either have to have a manager hired, we have to have a board that has comfort in the Utilities Committee and the many talents of our volunteers here on Sea Ranch, and there are a lot of volunteers on the Utilities Committee that are very, very capable, or we have to have another vehicle, a Blue Ribbon Committee or something else. But somewhere we're going to need to be able to attract and use the many talents that are necessary to get this to come down correctly. I'm very concerned about the communication problems between the utility committee and the board. I think steps have been taken in the right direction. I have a memo here that's a clarification for the utilities committee, board, staff, working relationships that was dated 3/18. So I know this is a serious concern to the board, and I think that they're paying close attention to it. I did view the Brown and Caldwell report that was done and the Utilities Committee's analysis of that. And it was very clear to me that we need to have the input from the Utilities Committee that was provided for that analysis.
Okay.
Jim, can I get a follow-up on that?
After that, Cecilia.
Oh, I'm sorry. Cecilia
Yeah,
already
we
spoke.
spoke.
She already spoke.
She
Oh,
started.
you already, that's right, you let off, okay, all right, so clarification from us.
Yeah,
You might want to stand up.
the question seemed to morph a little bit between Celia, I, and Roy, and since I was the director who helped rewrite the charter at the time that gets to the word, I think that Rich is pointing out is oversight. It probably needs some explanation because it's been a word, I think, that has caused a bunch of controversy. It's a word, and it was a very important word. And what was happening at the time when I was on the board the first time around was that we had a poor relationship between staff, between the Utilities Committee, and between the board. Though that triumvirate was not working. And I had to step back and take a look at how we made it work and how we can make that Utilities Committee work for the board. The Utilities Committee serves the board, serves the membership. Now, the problem with staff was that they felt like they were being micromanaged by the Utilities Committee. And the board was frustrated because we knew we had deficiencies in the plant that needed to be fixed, and we didn't have a plan in hand. And my attempt in changing the Utilities Committee charter was to get everybody pulling in the same direction and get rid of that term oversight, which I think staff was afraid of, and the board really didn't see that as the function of the Utilities Committee. We wanted long-range planning looking forward into the future. It was my hope by removing that word that that would achieve that goal. And it stirred up a hornet's nest, which I'm sorry for. But in the end, now we have a plan in hand. And I appreciated serving with you, Rich, on the Utilities Committee. I appreciated your leadership, and I loved serving with you. You kept the group on task, and you kept us focused, and we now have a plan, in good part because of your leadership.
Okay.
Is it too late for me to sign up to run?
All right, well, we've identified an important issue that could be the subject of future communications.
Marty Campbell, Unit 17, Lot 15. It's my understanding that with regard to the CSD, if we get the permission from the legislature to have the hybrid voting that would allow all Sea Rangers to vote, we would still have a separate board for the CSD than the TSRA board. And this question is for everybody. I'd like to hear what you think about that.
All right, well, let's start this round with Scott.
Thanks for the question, Marty. I have to give that some pause and really think that through. We get a lot of efficiencies right now, I think, by having a board that serves both the association and the water company. It gives us a lot of flexibility in how we deal with problems. But looking at the cost benefits of the CSD, it's really, really attractive. And so that's going to be something that I would really have to think about and weigh out on what we're giving up by having two separate boards.
Okay, Roy?
That's a good question, Marty, and unfortunately...
Put that mic close to your mouth.
Oh, pardon?
Mic close to your mouth.
Ice cream coming.
That's a very good question, and there isn't any answer at this time. At the March 7th meeting, Tim Gallagher went over a comparison of various costs, comparing CSD with other methodologies, but he made a strong point that it was only one particular case that he analyzed, And secondly, there is a lot more to be explored on the topic of converting to a CSD before we can make any definitive decisions. From my own personal point of view, one of the things I don't like about it is we would have to turn over the assets of the water company. It would no longer be ours. And we paid a lot of money for that. We went through 8 years on a learning curve, and I tend to be on the conservative side by wanting to maintain it strictly under our control. Now, there are pluses and minuses. Dealing with the PUC, for example, we now spend about $10,000 a year for the benefit of having PUC provide oversight. Well, that would be a plus. We wouldn't need to do that, for example. And at this point, like Scott, I have not spent the time to sift through all that. Board members like Jim Jordan right there, Tim Gallagher, Laurie Mueller have. And they still have not come up with a very definitive conclusion. The difficulty with Tim's graph, all due respect to you, Tim, is that you did show that plot, which made it so obvious that the CSD scenario was the cheapest and the best, but it was only one particular situation. And he did make a strong effort to say that it was only one particular scenario for interest rates and so forth. And I think people jumped onto that because prior to that meeting, the interest in the CSD began to lag a bit. And I think that meeting has rejuvenated the interest.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Marty. My understanding is that sometime in our past, there was a vote put to the membership for a community services district and it was turned down.
That's correct.
I don't know what the reasons were at the time for doing it, but we do have that history, and so there's obviously some concern about having that. Having said that, I also agree with what Roy has said, and that is I know Tim is working hard to try to figure out what all the alternatives are, and I think that the big unknown right now is that is the voting issue with this community services district. The only people who can vote for a community services district are those who are registered voters in Sonoma County.
Yeah, well, my question is, assuming that we get permission for everybody to vote, how do you feel about having 2 separate boards?
Well, first of all, we have 2 separate boards now. There's a board for the water company and there's a board for the association. It happens to be the same people, okay, but they're 2 separate boards. And so I don't think I have any particular problem with having 2 separate boards. If I had a concern, I would be more that I want to make sure we don't lose control of the asset. That's what worries me. Boy, you know, water, if we lose control of our water company here, we are in deep doo-doo. And so I think we need to find out how we can safeguard that. And so, you know, the finance guy in me says 80 cents or $80 a month versus $160, that's a no-brainer, okay? But I got a feeling there's more to it than that. And until we know all the facts, I don't think we can reach a conclusion.
Thanks, Marty. I think it's very difficult for outsiders. I guess I would consider myself an outsider because I haven't sat on this board and I haven't had the chance to hear all the deliberations and hear the viewpoints back and forth. On the face of it, and I would promise to do that if elected, but on the face of it, I think it's very difficult to give up a $50 million asset to a different control mechanism. So if I had to make a decision today, say, okay, what's the decision? I'd probably have to say I want to have the same people controlling the asset tomorrow that are controlling it today, which would be the same board.
Dave?
I did attend that meeting also. It was very new to me, and I'm certainly not experienced in this. But I came away thinking, do we really want a CSD? And if we do, I thought the idea of having separate boards would not be a bad idea. But that isn't because I'm convinced. It's only because I'm not thoroughly apprised of all the information. So I'd have to say, just from a superficial viewpoint, 2 boards would not be a bad thing.
Okay. Now, we're going to take one more question, and then we're at 4:40. We want to get going on closing statements. So,
Okay, thank you. Joyce George, Unit 24, I think it's lot 146. And I think my question is to Dave Ball regarding budgets, expenses. We've talked numerous times, keeping costs low and what you have to sacrifice in order to do that. My question to you is, I think you had mentioned $450,000 in savings. Where did that come from, basically? And maybe we should be doing more of the same thing, whatever that was. Thanks.
All right, where did it come from? 2 head count from the results of the chipper. There's a piece.
All right.
There was a 3%, originally in the budget, a 3% cost of living increase for the salary line for our employees, which of course also flows over to the benefits. And the board decided not to do that. That was a big piece. That was $2.32 or something like that. That was a big number out of the 186 that we were kind of working on, so that was almost half of it. Let me see, what else? All of a sudden my mind has gone completely blank. Bill, do you recall the other?
No, when she said Dave Ball, I
Oh, I'm sorry, okay. He's off the hook. I know we deferred some things. For example, I know we deferred some of the hedgerow. We deferred our hedgerow planting for a year. Now, you know, part of that, I think, very honestly, we've got a member here who is great. He grows cypresses for us, okay? And I think part of that was that we didn't have enough cypresses to do it anyway, but that was something else that came out. And I think there were some other things that were pushed out of the budget. But I think that those were the major, the real cuts in expense.
all right, good. Those are good questions, and I think these are good questions that focused on process, a lot of those questions. So that's very helpful. Some very key issues. All right, now we're ready to move to closing statements, and the order is going to be Dave Ball, Scott Nevin, Bill Retzer, Cecilia Moelter, and then Roy Austin. So we'll ask you to step up, Dave.
Well, thanks everyone for the questions. You try to think of what people will ask, you never really know, and things always come up that were really, really interesting, and so I appreciate that. There are 2 things I'd like to talk about: why I think I'm qualified to be on the board, and why I would vote for me. Qualifications to do the job. Like probably a lot of people, I didn't get involved in nonprofit work until I retired from my first career, and then I thought it was something that I had a chance to pay back. And so, you know that we love golden retrievers, and so Kathleen and I got involved in NorCal Golden Retriever Rescue. I was the treasurer on that board for 4 years. We had many financial problems. We were able to stabilize our finances. Our fundraising was in disarray, mainly through Kathleen's efforts and not mine, but we ended up with a 6-figure bank balance by the time I came off that board. And so I feel like I know how to budget, and I think I know how to find ways to create revenue. I was also the president of the Redwood Coast Medical Services Board. While I was on that board, we were requested to open a medical clinic in Point Arena. That was very controversial because we were very concerned. The board, about half the board said, you're going to drive the place under, we'll take the Wallala Clinic down if you do that. And so I made sure that we listened to everyone's concerns, and we found answers for them, or we made modifications to our agreement. But at the end of the day, we had an 18-member board that unanimously voted for that. And that is a good example of my ability to build consensus. As you know now, I've been the chair of the Finance Committee here at the Sea Ranch for the last 2 years. And if I think about what we've really been working on, it's been better communications. And I think the bulletin articles that we've had, the budget workshop presentations that have been done are good, and I think it illustrates that I'm an open person and I'm willing to listen to other people's ideas. So, why would I vote for me? I think the issues that we have in front of us require a strong business and financial background. The budget, the water company are 2 examples. I think I can be productive quickly. One of the reasons I got involved in the Finance Committee was I know that if you follow the money, you will find out where the issues and problems are. I've spent a lot of time looking at issues since I decided to run for the board, and I think I can be productive quickly. This is, I'm told, a 60 to a 100 hour per month commitment. It's a big, big commitment. It requires a lot of energy, it requires interest, and I think I have been defined by, or told by people that I'm what is called a heavy lifter. I'm willing to get involved, and I'm willing to put the time and effort into it. Lastly, I don't really have an agenda. I'll just try to do the best I can for everybody. Thanks very much for your questions and your participation. I look forward to talking to you over in the residence, and please give me your vote.
Try to make this short and sweet so we can go eat and drink. Thank you again for taking time out of your day to come listen to us. This is truly a remarkable association because of the time that all of us put into it. The last time I stood up here asking for your vote was 2002. I was an unknown commodity, an outsider at the time. Linda and I had only just recently bought our property. I had never served on a committee. There was lots of skeptical people. As I said at that forum to a questioner, I was ready to get off the sidelines and get on the front line. So here I am 7 years later. I have served as a director on the board. I've served as a utilities committee member. I've served on several task forces, including right now with Bill on the Solar Array Task Force. And I provided pro bono consulting and advice to the community manager on IT issues and the water company on monitoring. I've learned a lot in 7 years. And now I'm ready to jump back on the front line as a director again to serve you. So, in closing, if you have any further questions or concerns, please take the time to give me a call or send me an email message. I'd love to hear from you.
Mary and I picked up our dachshund, our yellow lab, and our parrot, and moved here full-time from Davis in 2003. Yeah.
I don't think it's on.
Did you turn this off?
I did. but only because Dave did first.
I take back my kind comments about that. Mary and I picked up our dachshund, our yellow lab, and our parrot, and moved here full-time from Davis in 2003, and we couldn't be happier. We live in one of the most beautiful places in the world and have found that we have more friends here than we've ever had before. People here care for each other. They care for their community, and they give freely of both their time and their talents. I believe my particular talents are strategic in nature. I don't take much for granted, and I don't commit to do something unless I'm willing to spend the time to do it right. I'm willing to do my own independent research. I enjoy innovation, and I think of myself as an early adopter. I have an active imagination, and I like to think outside the box. I understand the value of building a consensus, and I welcome compromise when it is for the good of the community. Last but not least, it's just my nature to help if I see a good situation turning bad. I would very much like to have the opportunity to be of further service, and I would appreciate your vote. Thank you.
definitely wanted to hear what I had to say last. I don't think I mentioned it before, but we moved here in 1995, but it took us 3 years to buy a house because we kept hopping from one rental to another, and we would just get in and someone would come along and say, this house is an escrow. So we thought we were good luck for the people that were selling the house. But in doing that, we saw a lot. We lived in the forest, we lived in the clusters, we lived down on the meadow, and so I can say that all the parts of the Sea Ranch that need attention would get attention from me. I would be a dedicated researcher if that was necessary. I'm a big volunteer. I believe in volunteerism. I've been with the SEAL DOSA program for a long time, with the dolphin in Wallala for a long time, and I would consider 60 to 100 hours a month something that I could do. I'm open-minded, but I don't close my mind on things, and I can switch if necessary if the facts present themselves. So I would hope that if you like the idea of a lively lady living lightly on the land, that you will vote for me. Thank you.
Five minutes, oh boy. Well, I'm last, and what's interesting, I think I'm more interested in what I'm going to say than you are. It seems to me that by and large, we all sort of sound alike. And I think that that's good in a way, because as Bill points out, we're going to need to get consensus in this future. We got some big decisions to make in the next 6-7 years. Dave made the point that he's strong in the financial profession, and I certainly agree that we need that. On the other hand, I'm just the opposite. I'm one of those technical geeks with a mechanical engineering background, but I think that's also needed simply because the issues, especially the water company, are very strongly oriented toward the technical. It's a complicated system, and I think we need both. And so I don't want to shortchange myself by saying, well, I'm not a financier. Maybe I should have been. I could have got a bonus. What I do want to say, though, is that because I'm very technical, I've focused only so far on dollars, dues, fiscal restraint, control, etc. That is my primary plank. And I also mentioned there are options, and I think Dave and others have mentioned them. I'm just going to read the list that I made up for myself. One is reductions in the 64% payroll by attrition. We may have to make direct reductions at some point. If so, that's going to be a very painful decision. I think we need to streamline and/or reduce middle management positions. I think we need to explore further outsourcing of work by contracts. I've talked with staff about this over the years, and there are some trade-offs, plus and minus. I want to revisit that. I think in addition to other revenue sources, we might want to consider use fees. That's a very sticky one. We charge people for using the pools. I don't know. At this point, I think all we can do is put it on our list of things to consider for revenue additions. Conservation of energy, I think, as we all know now, is going to be very important. I'd like, as an engineer, to do more work on understanding how we can save energy, and especially at its high prices. Prioritization and rescheduling projects is another one. As I said, our past process has been incremental, year by year addition. I think it's going to be time and a hard decision for us all in the future to decide how to prioritize which projects are nice to do, which we should do, and which are must-to-dos, and how do we schedule those and stay within a given zero-based budget. On the non-technical issues, I'm going to just list a whole bunch of ones that I've given a lot of thought to, and just to let you know that I haven't been strictly just a technical geek. Bluff erosion, trail relocation, DC process, it must be made consistent. I think we need the DC concept, there's no doubt about it. You just drive around and you see how great this place looks. But I think that the painful process that I've heard from some, I do think there needs to be some consistency put into that process. How the board does it, I don't yet know. We do meet with the design group. One more, okay. We did meet with the design committee once a year, maybe that's the place to do it. CC&R enforcement, I think there needs to be an alternate means other than just strict litigation. Build-out conditions, septic fields and sewers, water system availability, especially if the lodge requires the 1,500 gallon per minute fire flow capability. Who's going to pay for that? The water system upgrade, of course, is obviously another one, but that one's technical. And then lastly, very last one, I think we need to revisit ourselves and decide, now that we're getting a demographic change over the years, is this to be our community? Do we think of it as a resort? Or just how do we think of it? And I think that psychological, sociological process will help us make wise decisions.
All right, very good. Well, I'd certainly like to thank the Forum Committee for helping us get set, get organized. I would like to thank the members today for your questions, really probing and good process questions. I'm glad to hear those. And certainly our slate of candidates, I think we've got some great quality here and some deep thinkers, and I think we're in good shape no matter who wins this election coming up. So thank you very much, and a round of applause for Now, in keeping with Sea Ranch tradition, remember that it's helpful if you can help put away chairs.